to write down all the things my mom might need to know just in case. See, my mother was a college administrator's wife, and so her job was to do charity work, to entertain, to raise me, but she didn't know anything about taking care of the house and the mortgage, paying bills, any of that. So while my father was recovering these 2 times in the ICU, which he lovingly called maximum security, he would write down all of these things. Then he would come home and sit at the table with my mother for 2 hours going over each and every item to make sure that she knew how all of that worked. A few days before Christmas, my father went into the hospital again. And 2 days after Christmas, one day before my 14th birthday, the doctor came by the house to tell us he had passed away. The notebook came home. He didn't. And what followed was a flurry of activity because my mother wanted the funeral to be done during the holidays while everyone was home. Now, my 14th birthday, contrary to popular belief, 3 days after Christmas, a lot of people think it all gets meshed in with Christmas, but not if you're a spoiled only child. It was a regular big birthday, not with friends, but with my family. Every birthday had this wonderful chocolate sheet cake and ice cream and presents, and I knew if I didn't get something for Christmas, 3 days later it would probably be on my birthday table. But this year was different. This year, my mother just gave me money and sent me downtown while she was making funeral arrangements. And for a 14-year-old kid, this was a dream come true. I mean, we bought albums, and I bought hamburgers for everybody, and toys and candy and all of this. And I'm sitting on the bed that night showing my mother everything that I bought. And then it hits me, and I break down. My mother asked me, what is wrong? And I tell her, there weren't any books. See, my father bought me books every birthday. The number of books that corresponded to the number of years in my life. My very first birthday, it was Pokey Little Puppy. Second birthday, Hungry, Hungry Caterpillar and The Little Engine That Could. And he always wrote inscriptions in the book. So by the time I got older, there would be this big box on the birthday table with a tag on it that said "To Speed," his nickname for me from Dad. And inside would be all these individually wrapped books, each one with his inscription, his handwriting in there. My mother says, wait a minute, and she leaves and she brings back a box with a tag on it, "To Speed from Dad." She didn't know how I would feel about getting a gift from my father 2 days after he'd passed away. But inside were 14 books, each one with an inscription. And so my dad was still there. And all through that year, I had my dad there with each book I opened and read each inscription. I knew that he was still around. I usually read all of the books in the first couple of months, but because I knew this was the last box, I only read 1 or 2 a month and made sure that I was reading that last book all the way up to the night before my 15th birthday. The next morning I go down and there's the ice cream, the sheet cake, the presents, and a big box with a label on it that says, "To Speed from Dad." And I open it up and there are 15 individually wrapped books. When I was born, my dad went to the college library and talked to the children and young adult librarian. And he had arranged to buy and pay for books all the way through my 18th birthday. That's 171 books. I opened the first one and it was there. There was no inscription, but the books became my father's words to me as I read them and learned things out of them. And on my 18th birthday, I saved one of those books so I'd have something for my 19th birthday. And I went downstairs and I put that book on the table where the big box used to be. I ate the cake, the ice cream, opened the other presents, and then I opened that book. Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I went back upstairs and I started reading that book till 3 in the morning when I finished it. And when I read that epilogue, when I read that last paragraph and that very last sentence, it had so much meaning. It was so perfect. It was my Father speaking to me. The sentence was, that may be the subject of the next story, but our present story is over. I closed the book. I cried and I said goodbye to my father 5 years after he passed away. But that wasn't the only words that he left me. On our way home from the funeral, I asked my mother, I said, Mom, are we going to have a Grogan cake? You see, we had this tradition in our family. On the first day of the new year, there would be this cake, and it would have roasted pecans and caramel and chocolate, and you would go in the kitchen and this cake, this beautiful coffee cake, would just be coming out of the oven. And the story behind that is that a Grogan, this little Scottish elf, had baked it in the night for the family. And this made perfect sense. My father was Scottish. He was a farmer. These elves helped farmers. In fact, my father grew up leaving a saucer of milk out every full moon for the Grogan to ensure the cows would give milk. Now this little creature would make this cake, and then what you had to do is, with your first slice of cake, everybody got their first slice of cake, with each bite you had to express a gratitude out loud. Now as a little bitty boy, I was also a little afraid that this creature was still roaming around in our house. And I took very, very big bites so I didn't have to come up with many gratitudes. But as I got older, I loved the fact that this was a tradition that only my family had. No one, to this day, have I ever met that enjoyed a Grogan cake. And the whole idea here was, once you'd expressed your gratitudes, the Grogan accepted them and blessed you with great things in the coming year, and then you are supposed to leave the old year behind and move on, looking forward to all the good things the Grogan is giving you. So when I asked my mother, are we going to have a Grogan cake on our way home from my father's funeral, she said, oh, Pumpkin, no, we're not. Why? Daddy would have wanted us to. Oh, he would have, Pumpkin. But he was the only one who knew how to make it, and there never was a recipe. I was devastated. I lost my dad. That was horrible, but I also lost my Grogan. The evening, day before the first day of the year, end of the year, 31st, I'm sitting on my bed reading this first book my father had given me in my 14th birthday. And my mom walks in and she walks over and drops a notebook on my book. And I look down and there's the name of an electrician and a phone number, the name of a plumber, phone number. There's a drawing of our breaker box with all the breakers listed. But below that, in my father's impeccable handwriting, were the words, Grogan cake, with a very intricate recipe. I look up and say, are we going to have a Grogan cake? Well, Pumpkin, I guess that's up to the Grogan. Turn the page. I turned the page, and there at the top, my father had listed things I'm grateful for. 1, speed. 2, Junebug, what he called my mother. And 3, Mama, for teaching me how to make a Grogan cake. The rest of the page and the rest of the book were blank. It was the last thing he had ever written. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of roasted pecans and chocolate and caramel, and I run in the kitchen just as the Grogan cake is coming out of the oven. And with that first slice, with every bite, each and every bite that everyone took that day, every expression of gratitude was for something my father had done or given us. And I took very, very tiny bites. We laughed, we cried, we remembered, and then we moved on, because that's what my father and the Grogan wanted us to do. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Another round of applause for Eric, Sarah, Mike, and Pamela, and me. And applause for you, the audience. Thank you so much. I always say storytelling is like an apple. It has flavor, but not until you taste it. And I want to thank each and every one of you for tasting the apples that we have offered to you today. Please stick around. Margaret Burke is next with her Irish Root Tales. This lovely lady, the first thing I ever told, the first open mic was an open mic hosted by her, and she's been my mentor and my guide all through this. You've got to stick around and hear her stories. And thank you again.